So the second part of the video, I split it up because I guess it would be too hard to put it all in the same thing. There's so many like moving pieces, and there were some things that were worthy of explanation. So the god of destruction at the center of the universe was kind of like a twin, and the destructive part was more masculine. The feminine part was the creative part, but it actually defied gender by any means that we would say something has a gender, but it had traits that were more masculine and more feminine. And our species mirrored those traits, but only partially. It didn't really care about masculine and feminine. There was a need for me to try to personify elements and like primordial forces and to make them human, so to speak. And that was just a human need. It actually wasn't the nature of any of these things. I don't think they cared. They just were. And the way that the thing roared, the way that it breathed, the way that it roared and create and destroyed and created things was like a breath. It was like this explosion, and then it imploded on itself, and it just kept on doing that and exploding, imploding, and it was on a scale that was just unimaginable. And so, of course, with through the eyes of humanity, in looking at these things, I had a definite sense of unbelievable horror. It very much reminded me of like a Lovecraftian story. It made me wonder how many other people who have imaginative traits had similar experiences with their dreams, and was Lovecraft's stories, did those happen because he had similar experiences? I've noticed that a lot of creative people have similar sorts of things where they see the universe in similar sorts of ways. They try to explain it. One of the I guess it's almost humbling how utterly inhuman our existence, everything around us is, and we keep on looking for like the man in the moon, things that are like human, and so we try to make extraterrestrials human-like, and the life forms on the planet are far more alien than anything could be in outer space. And I think that there's like this mirroring in what is our reality versus what we don't know. And so, to give you an example, lots of vortexes exist on the planet. You have vortexes, like if I flush a toilet, there's a vortex. I can have a vortex in water, and I can have a tornado. It's a vortex, and I believe that all these things function in very similar ways as to what cosmic phenomenon is. And so, a black hole is a vortex in space time, just like the flushing of a toilet, but in space time. And things like that are really weird and trippy to think about. The dream I had of my death and being torn apart, it it made me consider how inhuman the universe was. But I also had a great struggle in trying to give those describe those events and put them into words because they defied words. So, in particular with gods and deities and things, I think a lot of times we want our gods to be physical manifestations of what humanity is. I believe that at the heart of those things, that's called an egregore. An egregore basically is a psychic construction, a pseudo person. The easiest way to explain this is with Batman. Batman doesn't exist, but we know so much, so many people on the planet know so much about this imaginary character that it is basically like something that's alive within our minds. And so if I showed you a priest in white robes and told you it was Batman, you would say no because you have a very clear idea of who Batman is. But the reality is that Batman doesn't exist. He's a fabrication. He's like a paper doll of the mind that exists within people. And people have a tendency to build these imaginary constructs and personify them. It's part of the way that we understand things. And so if we look at like political parties and you think of what a political party is, that person doesn't exist. The stereotype, the agreed upon what that personification is for that political party is an illusion. And so when people try to push back against the illusion, they end up finding nothing there because it was always just a figment of our imagination. It was always an egregore, a psychic scarecrow, so to speak. The primordial forces of the universe, the things that we would call gods, at least the ones that I visited in my mind, I don't think they exist in that way at all. And so there's a struggle to give them an association with an animal, a person, a personification, an image, but they really are formless. They're kind of like Legos of emotion. What I mean by Legos is that they're kind of a grouping, a clustering together of emotion and thought. And in doing that, we tend to try to give them human faces when they're not human at all. One of the things about these recurrent dreams of like the afterlife and these crazy, weird deities that either prey on human life or invigorate it, or just the destructive and creative cycles of the universe, all these things tend to kind of exist in spite of us. And we don't have the significance that we think we do. And so in my dreams of my recent one of death, actually flies had more relevance. And one of the ways that this was measured was just the biomass of every fly that had ever existed, and the percentage of life force and the matter of their life force, and it far exceeded anything that the humans did. And so, if you thought about every human being being clumped together like a planet, how big would that be? If we were every human that ever existed, and then if we did that for every fly that ever existed, they were much more significant life form because they used up much more biomass and they had a higher percentage of life. And so humanity was not as significant as flies were or these other creatures, which was kind of daunting because I think this thing that we have, this consciousness, this evolved state of being able to perceive and reflect on things, we tend to think that that makes us better. But in the eyes of the universe, it didn't matter at all. It was like the most insignificant thing. And to view significance as you know, maybe attaining a more a higher evolved state was part of the human arrogance. And one of the reasons that we had a hard time reintegrating back into the universe. And so in these series of like crazy dreams, the worst thing that someone could do was actually entomb themselves, because in doing so they prevented their energy of their consciousness and the physicality of their matter from rejoining the universe. And that left that individual in an agonized state for a prolonged period of time because they weren't able to be reabsorbed back into the primordial stuff of creation. And so all this has made me really terrified of being buried in a traditional way. I'd rather be cremated, and I just want to be directly reabsorbed back into the universe. The idea that we are separate from creation and from the planet is an erroneous one. I think that it's important that people need to remember that we're part of the earth in a very intimate way. We're literally part of its building blocks. And when we pass away, if we want to I guess, do so in a more healthy, constructive manner, we need to be reabsorbed by the universe and reabsorbed by our planet, and to not separate ourselves. And again, I think that arrogance comes from the fact that people believe that they have attained a higher state of being, and therefore they don't necessarily need to exist as part of the planet, when the very best that we can do is be part of it. It's interesting stuff to think about. I mean, just very, very interesting, very different than anything anybody ever tells you. And again, this is just dreams. I don't know how real dreams are. I mean, they inspire us, they give us ideas. But I don't know if there's like truth to be found in dreams. I guess for some there is. But definitely not the spoon-fed mythology that every other religion tells us to believe in, which I haven't found any evidence of at all, either literally or in the journeys of my subconscious. I mean, all those illustrations, all those the symbolism, it all falls apart rather quickly and has no relevance at all. But yeah, just wanted to share that.